Welcome everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. If anyone coming from countries, it's almost night time. So my name is Prabha Taranet, or many call me Pat, and welcome everyone to CESRA Talk on heavy metals, waters, and soil remediations. And today's discussion, we will address the challenge of heavy metal pollutions, and we will explore both practical, I guess, and innovative strategy to clean our water and restore our soil. And our talk will begin by understanding the source and risk associated with heavy metal contaminations. And from there, we will examine the range of remediation technologies spanning from conventional chemical treatments to nature-based biological solutions, if I understand it correctly. If not, please correct me. And today, Dr. Alessia Corami is a researcher at the CERESRA in English. It's the Research and Teaching Center Environmental Geoscience from Marseille University from France. And her PhD is in phosphate-induced heavy metal immobilizations in aqueous solutions and soils. And her research focuses on sustainable remediation method on waste from mining activity in sustainable management of mining waste and tailings. And Dr. Alessia, thank you very much for joining us today. And we are honored to have you with us. And I will now hand over the floor to you for your presentation. And following that, we will open the floor for questions and a group discussion. Please.
Thank you very much. And yes, you are right. I'm working at the Aix-Marseille University in France, but I'm Italian. And generally, I'm working on the metals in the mining activity, so how we can find a sustainable solution to remediate. I'm going to start to present my slides. Okay, so now is it in presentation mode, right?
Yes, please.
Perfect. So these are the points that I'm trying to develop, starting with the definition of metals, because we are using the name of heavy metals because we used to use, but some colleagues start to find a different definition. The problem of contamination, if it is an old problem or a recent problem, the type, the classification of the remediation treatment that we can choose, and then the evolution for the nature-based solution and phytoremediation. So something that we have to understand that heavy metals are metals. When we are speaking about metals, we have to think that we need these metals. So this is why we can say that we still need the mining activity, even though we are aware that can create a pollution problem. But one of the biggest problems with the metals is the toxicity, because they are really dangerous for the human beings, and we can find metals in the food. They can reach the water, the agricultural soil, so we can eat them. So they can reach in an easy way the food chain. They can stay for a long time in the atmosphere. So this is why I was telling before that in some cases it was observed that many of the contaminants, in this case inorganic and organic, are really old, starting from the 50s. And then the other problem is the bioaccumulation that we can observe of these metals. But we have to think about where we can find this metal. We can find everywhere, starting with the soil, water, atmosphere, during the rocks. So we have to understand also the sources of these metals. Because we can say that with our activities, we are polluting the environment, so we can distinguish a commercial industrial source, but in some areas we can define also geogenic sources. This means that also rocks are enriched with these metals, and they are could be in a low amount, but also in high amount. Where I was in Louisiana, it's quite normal to find arsenic in the soil because it has a geogenic origin. So this is not due to the anthropogenic activity. is a natural origin, and we have to face also this problem. It's not so simple as we can imagine. The other problem is that why we are studying metals. Unfortunately, metals are not biodegradable as we can suppose for the organic contaminants, but they also, we can say they are stable. But in some cases, when the condition of the environment start to change, they can be mobile and they can be also bioavailable. So they can reach also our body, so they are affecting the living organism. The other problem is when we are thinking about the wind and water erosion, because metals generally they are bound with the clay particles and the organic matter. So the first layer of the soil, what we call humus, and these particles can be transported in a simple way. So the erosion is something that we have to stop to reduce also the mobility of these metals. So when we are thinking about the remediation, it's something that is not simple as we can say, because we are not facing only one type of contaminant. And even though we have only one class, like metals or other type of contaminants, it's not simple. So this is why we have to carry out a survey to understand the area that we have to treat. So we have to understand the geomorphology, geology, pedology, hydrology, the land use that we had in the past, the land use that we want to have, because when we are speaking about remediation means that we want to recover an area and to reuse this area, and obviously also to understand the waste that we are facing. So we are thinking also about what we can define as an environmental risk and a risk assessment, because it's important to understand the treatment that we are going to use to remediate the area is not going to make something that is not good for maybe in 10 years, 15 years. This is important. So this is why we can say that when we are choosing a treatment, we have to think also for the future, why we are going to do this treatment, and if it is something that it could be sustainable or not. And then we can say that many sites is not only with contaminated with only one of pollutants, so we have to understand the type of pollutants that we are facing and all the characteristics of the pollutants. So it's not so simple as we can imagine. Starting with the definition of the metals, from the chemical elements, we can understand that all the metals are in red. So we have metals, metalloids, and non-metals. And if you see, they are quite different. We generally speaking about cobalt, chromium, zinc, copper, lead, sometimes arsenic because it could be present, but also the others. Also vanadium could be dangerous for us. We may know that mercury is really dangerous, but it's important to understand that they behavior is quite similar. When we are speaking about metals, we define them according to the density, comparing with the density of the lantanides and actinides, that is over 5 grams per cubic centimeter. But the problem is that we define this chemical characteristic, but we are not considering the toxicity and bioavailability. So this is really 2 points that are really fundamental, meaning that we could have these metals in our soil, if we are speaking about the soil and for the agricultural activity. So we have to understand how this metal can affect our crop. So if they could be toxic, for example, reaching the living organism, doesn't matter if we're speaking about person, animal, or plant, because then obviously they can reach our food chain. And it's important to understand also the bioavailability, so the amount can reach the living organism, so we can define also the bioaccumulation. This is why I suggest you to think about the zinc. Zinc is something that in a low concentration could be useful for the vegetation, so for the plants, but also we use for the skin problem to produce cream. Even though it's defined as an heavy metal, in low concentration could be useful, but also other heavy metals in low concentration are not dangerous. So this is why we start to think that our definition as a classification as heavy metals is not correct, but we can define as a potential toxic elements. And these are 3 articles that I found, because 2 of them, this one is written by 2 of my colleagues. It's important that we understand how they are present in the environment that we are going to study, is how they can affect the environment that we are going to treat. So it's important how they are present, the chemical form that we are going to study. The other point that I want to highlight when we start to think about contamination. So we can say that the first concept of contamination starts with the Industrial Revolution, maybe we can say also after the Second World War, when we start to increase all the industrial activity, start an important contamination of the environment. But we can say also that in the past, from the Bronze Age and Iron Age, we start to contaminate the environment. Then we can say, obviously, in that moment, people that are living on our planet is not so in huge amount. So the contamination is really in little areas. But increasing the population, we are aware that also the contamination starts to be diffused, and we know that now contamination is a really worldwide problem, and also we need land for producing food, because we think that in 10, 15 years, population reach 10 billions, and it's important that we increase the food production, but with less contaminants in soil. So the point that we have to develop and think during the contamination is the amount of the waste that we are producing during our treatment, and then this waste that we have to dispose, and how we can remove these compounds, because they are compounds toxic for us, but we have to understand if they are affecting soil and the water, because yes, we can start with the soil, but then we have to think that with the water, with the precipitation, we have water erosion that can reach fresh water and sea. So it's important when we talk about the remediation, the point that we want to develop. If we are speaking about to degrade or to remove these components, it's not so simple as we can imagine. We can talk about degradation for the organic contaminants, also hydrocarbons. They can be degraded, we can say in a simple way, if we compare with the treatment that we have to apply for the heavy metals. But generally we have to find a solution that is sustainable for this site, so we can use the site, the brownfield that is treated again for a second reason. Could be different, because in many cases we can create leisure park, we can use it for buildings, or we can use it also for the agricultural activity. But when we're speaking about the remediation, we have to think it's not only one topic that we have to study, but we know now we are aware that all the microorganisms are an active component also in the remediation treatment. Then we have to think about the engineering, ecology, geology, chemistry, whatever, to reach a sustainable solution. This is important. And the other point that is really fundamental, that we start to think how, when we have a site that we have to treat, also if we are speaking about the water, not every time we can find a suitable solution, or only one solution. Maybe we have to apply more than one solution. So we have to think about in a different way, thinking how we can solve the problem in that moment, and also how we can maintain the solution that we have found. So to think about our solution is good for this moment, but in 10 years, what's going to happen? So it's something that we have to understand this point. The other is the classification. Starting from the old, the first time that we thought about the treatment, we can define the ex situ treatments and the in situ treatment. Ex situ treatments are really old. The simple one, they are quite costly. It's the excavation for the soil that is really simple, very largely applied, and then the pumping the water is another one that we used a lot for the fresh water. The in situ treatment is something quite recently that we start to apply. We can use it for soil and groundwater. The point is that we are a minimal disturbance for the environment. And this is also to maintain the morphology of the area that we are going to study. The main difference is the cost. The ex situ are really expensive, but in some cases we cannot apply a different treatment. So it's something that we have to understand. It's not so simple. This is the dig and hole. because I present you two examples of the ex situ treatment that's really diffused. The digenol is quite simple, and it was decided starting from the law. This is the example from the US in 1984, because you can apply the digenol that is just to dig the soil that is polluted, and then obviously you have to store, to deposit this polluted soil, and you can add a new soil. I define in this way because it's something that is a clean soil, fertile, and so on, so you can reuse it, the area. The point is that when we are using or choosing this solution, obviously, if you see, could be costly, but to apply the digenol or another treatment, we have to understand the lateral and vertical extension of the pollution, because we have to be aware if we can use it, the digenol or another solution, doesn't matter. So we have to choose the correct solution. And obviously, we have to think about the possible migration, because so we have to study if there are fault, fracture, or any groundwater system. So we must be aware about to reduce all the migration, and then obviously we can choose. So these are points that are valid for digenol, but also for another treatment. It's not only for one treatment. The point is that if we can study, or I may say deeply study, the area or the medium that we are going to treat, we can define one or more than one treatment to apply for that area. So we can also be aware that also in the future, this area could be used at the best and without any kind of problem. But this means also to, let me say, take care about the medium that we are going to treat. It's important that we don't think after the remediation that we applied, our work is finished. It's not in this way. Also, if we're thinking about the freshwater or groundwater system, we have to check quite regularly if it is good or not, if we finished with the problem, if we solved the problem. Could be soil, could be water, it doesn't matter. These are the other old way to treat fresh water, the pump and treat. Really a simple way to use it, because you have this well that reach, in this case, the groundwater system, so you can pump the water and the water reach the treatment building. Then with different way to treat the water, at the end you have a clean water. But in this way you can contain the contamination area. That is also important, because in the groundwater system, contaminants can move in an easy way. And then obviously you can treat the water, avoiding also to reach fresh water. You can have drinking water in this case, and you can reuse it, we can say. So generally speaking, we have 1, 2 wells or more than 1 wells according the area. The way to treat the water could be the active carbon, hair stripping. These are methods that are really well known, and in a little area you can treat this. We can use it till nowadays without any kind of problem. They are not costly because it's a really old way to treat the water. So all the technologies that we are using today are quite simple, and we well known the answer from this treatment. So really good. Then we pass to the in situ remediation. In this case, we are applying amendment for soil and water. Obviously, they are less expensive, less disruptive to the environment. You can respect the environment, and mainly for the metals in this case, and this is my job, is about the in situ remediation. We can use different amendments. In this case, they are particular minerals. So we have clay minerals, apatite and zeolite. We very well these minerals. I'll show you some picture of them. So these are the zeolite. Zeolite and clay minerals are well known, very used for a long time to treat the metals, only because if you can see, these are the 3-dimension scheme for them, so how they can be present, the different mineral, the voids is where we can find the metals after the absorption. And then I study all the phosphate, in particular apatite and hydroxyapatite, where always the concept is that this amendment can sorb metals, mainly you can observe in substitution with calcium. So after the treatment, you can observe the precipitation of a mineral that could be, we defined as a metal phosphate, because you can you lose the calcium and you have the metal instead of the calcium. And the point is that if you check the pH in this case, you can have what we can define a crystalline mineral, so it's well formed. Otherwise, as I did on my different experiments, without checking the pH, because if you're treating a large area, it's quite difficult, you have an amorphous minerals. But the point is not how they can crystallize, but you can say that the minerals that you get after the treatment is really stable, because you can use it, you can change the pH after the treatment. Could be a very acidic pH, and they are stable. So this is the point, that if we are using this amendment for soil or water, you can be sure that for a long time they are stable. So this is important, because when you're speaking about the environment, we can observe that pH can change for different reasons, and obviously they can be mobile again, and so they can be bioavailable. So this is the fundamental point, that in this case, we are sure that for a long time we don't have any kind of problem, but doesn't mean that we cannot check our results. We have to always to check if they are stable. But for my studies, I used also the waste from the fertilizer production activity, and from one, it was from the US, and the second one from Morocco. Both of them, even though they contain some metals, they are really good amendments to immobilize metals and to sorb most of the metals with a high result. So it's something that they are cheaper in this case because they are waste, and the result is about 98% of the immobilization for this for the metal in water and in the soil. Then the next step, when we are thinking about a treatment that must be sustainable, science starts to talk about the nature-based solution. Means something that is sustainable, but also within the nature, and obviously thinking about the opinion of the people that are living close to the area. So when we are in Thailand, we observed also one of the simple method that we start to use it to recreate the mangrove forest, because in the past we destroy for different reasons mangrove forests. Then we start to be aware that mangrove forests can protect the coast from the sea activity, so we start to redo it. So a nature-based solution are solutions that we already know they are positive. For different reasons, we decide to destroy, like the wetland system, and then we start to restore the previous ecosystem, the previous environment that we had in that area. But the point that is fundamental for nature-based solution is that we decide the solution with the people, with stakeholder and population that are living over there. So it's something that is more enlarged to a different approach that take care also about the opinion of people that are over there. The concept, if we are going to talk about the nature-based solution, is to obviously always to reduce the concentration of the contaminants, to isolate the contaminant, to avoid the spread of this contaminant, to reduce the erosion. And in case of the metals, we have to take care about the mineral that we are facing, their concentration, if they could be immobilized, if they could be mobile or be available in a second moment, and whatever. So the same points that we can we at least have listed in the past is the same also for nature-based solution. And mainly three network-based solutions that we start to observe that are positive with the good results is the green roofs, the rain gardens, and constructive wetland that we can apply to reduce the runoff for the precipitation and mainly also for the heavy precipitation, and also if we are reducing the runoff, meaning that we are increasing the infiltration of the water in the soil, so recharging also the groundwater system, and obviously reducing also the flood risk or the landslide in different area. So this is really important that if we are talking about this type of solution, even though we are not talking about immobilization of metal or other contaminants, we are reducing a problem that means to the erosion to transport soil particles in a different area, because there are studies that already observe that particles from the Sahara Desert reach South America with the wind erosion. So we have to be aware that erosion is a great problem for the soil, because all the clay particles, all the organic matter can be transported in a simple way with the water and with the wind. So we are using on the fertile part of the soil, so it's affecting obviously the agricultural activity. This is an example of the green roof in an urban area in this case. I started to read about the green roofs in 2000 in Japan. They start to create this garden on the skyscraper. This means that when we have a precipitation, the leaves in this area can absorb most of the water, so reducing the drops of the water that can reach the ground. Obviously, we can increase the moisture of the area. This means also to decrease the temperature of the building and also then of the energy that we use for the air conditioned. We can increase biodiversity. We have an area that is also important for pollinators, and we can discuss also about the problem of pollinators. But it's important to understand that in urban area, we can increase also the green area. That is also with the concept of the biophilic cities. These are the other suggestions that in many cities we start to do it. It's the rain garden. So in a garden, you can have area with plants that are native species. And this means with the root system, you can increase again the infiltration. So the water can go to recharge the groundwater system. So in this case that you are having precipitation, but you can face also the drought phenomena that maybe is the next season that is too hot. The last one is the wetland, the constructing wetland. So you can treat wastewater using plants. The area could be close to the urban area, could be an industrial area, doesn't matter. But the point is that after this treatment, the water could be reused. And obviously, as I said before, water can be reused according to the laws. For example, in France, from July 24, it was a law that allow us to reuse wastewater after the treatment, not only for the agricultural activity that is already done, but also for the food production. Instead, in Italy, is not allowed anymore. So it's something that, according to the laws that you have in the country, you can use it, this water that is already treated. And then we pass to the phytoremediation, that's based also on the constructing wetland, only because phytoremediation is a treatment that also is based on the plants, but it sometimes suggests as a second treatment also with in situ or ex situ remediation. The point is that one of the, we can say, disadvantages for phytoremediation is the time. When we're speaking about ex situ remediation or in situ remediation, we can say the time is really important. For the ex situ, time is really short, but phytoremediation needs time, but the results are positive, and you can see for for about a decade, you have a good result, and plants can absorb organic, inorganic contaminant, can treat also radioactive elements, so it's something positive. You need plants that produce a high amount of biomass. This is a really important point. But also, you know that plant can reduce the erosion, can stabilize the soil. So the results are positive. So this is why phytoremediation is also defined as a second solution when you are choosing different treatment. The other point is obviously that population can say yes to the plants. It's not something negative. And according the depth in the soil, you can choose if you can use it trees, because you can reach a depth about 3 meters, or the herbaceous species, so you can reach about 50 centimeters. But it's important that sometimes you can have you can check the toxicity level. So let me say the concentration in this case, because it's not always possible to use only the phytoremediation. So, as I said, with phytoremediation, we can treat inorganic pollutants, doesn't matter the origin, the organic pollutants, hydrocarbon, but also we can think that plants can be helped in this case for the treatment also with the microorganism. We don't have to forget that we are speaking about an environment that it's not only the plants in this case, but also the organism that we can find in the soil and in the water. So this is an example of all the reaction that we have for a plant, starting with the photosynthesis, obviously, but then for the root system, we can observe the root respiration, the transpiration for the root, and also the production of different type of exudate that are also important for the remediation, and the mineralization of other minerals that is also important for the phytoremediation. So the first one that it was studied, it was the phytoextraction, because it was observed in the mining areas that there are plants that can absorb metals through the root system. Then from the root system, these metals can be transported to the shoot system, and then we have to think about the biomass. In the past, the biomass that it was polluted must be deposited, but this type of plants that they don't show any problem in sorbed metals, they have been defined as hyperaccumulators. The problem is that they cannot produce small biomass because they are really little plants, but it's important that the area of the mining activity, it's an area that is not anymore fertile, so it was observed that only this type of plants can survive. So we can say they are a pioneering plant species, and then we can add different type of plant to restore the fertility in the area. The other point is, what can we do with this biomass that is polluted? So thinking for the first step, it was only to deposit, to find the place. Now we start to be aware that biomass can be used for the energy production or for producing the biochar. And then also during the pyrolysis, that is the treatment with the high temperature to burn all this biomass, we have to use a filter for the contaminants that we have. But the good point is that what we define it past as a waste, it's not anymore a waste, it's something that we can use it. So this is the definition also of the circular economy. The other treatment is the rise of filtration, like the constructive wetland. So root system can absorb the different type of contaminants, and then you can get water that could be used for a second purposes. Could be the agricultural activity, could be for cleaning from the street, for the heating system or whatever, but mainly we can start to be aware that if the quality of the water that we can get from the rise of filtration for the other treatment is quite good, we can reuse it also for the industrial activity. The only industrial activity that needs a very good high quality is for the electronic device. So this is only the exception that we can imagine. If we are speaking about rise of filtration or constructing wetland, we have to take care about the pH. pH must be controlled so root system can work in a very good way, and so we can get also good, very good result. The other that is important is the phytostabilization. In this case, we are using plant to stabilize the soil. In the root system, again, can absorb the metals. The production of the exudate can also degrade the organic contaminant. Meanwhile, we have to think also that is important all the microorganisms that have a a very important role for this degradation, but it's important to understand that we are going to apply the phytostabilization means we are stabilizing the soil, reducing obviously the movement of the soil, so the erosion, but also the opportunity or the probability of a landslide. So this is why one of the nature-based solution is also to suggest in the agricultural land to have this line of trees to reduce the wind and water erosion, because they can protect the soil from the wind erosion and the water erosion. So it's not so simple as a treatment, but we could have a good result because we are protecting the environment, and obviously we have to choose in any case the right plant. So in many cases, it is suggested to use the local plant because they can be adapted to the climate and you know already how they can behave. Or there are some plants that can be quite flexible to that we can use everywhere. It depends on the what the result that we want to have. And so the point that is important for the phytostabilization is also that we need fertilizer. When we are going to talk about phytoremediation, fertilization is important, but it's also important to understand that this area needs, in some cases, fertilizer because it's not anymore an area that is so fertile, but also metals can be immobilized with this with the phytostabilization. The other is the rhizodegradation. So we have the mineralization and degradation of different type of contaminants due to the presence of the microorganism and the exudate that the root system can produce, normally produce in this case. So we have different type of approach in this case, and also with the rhizodegradation we have the phytovolatilization that it was used, it was observed for a long time for selenium, for example, that is really a good solution, even though selenium can reach with the phytovolatilization in the atmosphere, so we can imagine in a second moment the atmospheric deposition, but something that we must be aware in the atmosphere, we have many types of contaminants, and again, fertilizer is important to allow the different microorganisms to survive and to act in the good way to degrade all the contaminants. So this is an example how all these different type of phytoremediation can work in the same time, because we can talk about them in a different way, in a separated way, but they work in the same time. And obviously the point is the plant that we have to choose according to the results that we want in the area that we have to study. It's not too simple. We need, for the phytoremediation, we suggest a long time because the root system must developed. And obviously, we could have good results, but it's important to understand that we cannot solve all the problem in a second, but we need time. And the point is that we are not facing area only with metals, but we are facing area with different type of contaminants. If we are so lucky to have only one type of contaminants like metal, we are speaking with the hyperaccumulator plants, and then we can start with the second type of vegetation. So we have different results according to the type of contaminants in the area that we are facing. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Corami, for your insightful presentations. It's kind of like interesting to know so many types of phytoremediations. And I think is that anyone having any questions? You can raise your hands, or you can put your questions or discussion point into the chat box. Okay, we have one question from the chat. Thank you for your excellent presentation. And how do we manage the recontamination of areas after initial remediation efforts?
It depends on the type of contaminant in any case. If you are speaking about, for example, hydrocarbons, you may know that there are many microorganisms that can degrade hydrocarbons. If you are speaking about organic contaminants, it doesn't matter which type of organic contaminants, there are many products that you can find from different companies everywhere, not only in the US or Europe, that can be helpful. The point is that mainly these treatments are needs time, not a long time, obviously, but you could have good results. But in any case, you have to control the result with the time. So this is the point. When we're speaking for the remediation treatment, we didn't solve the problem for the first application. We have to consider after maybe 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and so on. When I was in Germany, we went with my students to visit a place for a groundwater system that was treated. And it was, they are checking every 6 months the quality of the water to be sure that there's no other problem, because this is something that we have to be aware. We can imagine that could be a fracture, could be an earthquake that can reactive a fault. I am a geologist, so I'm thinking in this way, but there's any reason where a contaminants can reach again the groundwater system. Could be also the soil, doesn't matter. So taking care, checking every time. You can decide after 1 year if it is good or not, but you can do it. And obviously, maybe you have to apply for a second time or a third time.
Sydney, please.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you so much for Dr. Alessia for a wonderful presentation. However, I'm more interested in the biomass. So my question is like, can the harvested biomass from the phytoremediation be used, like for example, for sustainable energy, or will it have like an impact on the environment? Irrespective, like for example, turning the effective of cleanup operation into circular economy. So I'm more interested in the biomass of phytoremediation.
No, you can use it. As I said, the biomass nowadays that you have from any type of treatment, in this case phytoremediation, you can use for producing the energy. I wrote a project in Spain, and obviously you have to take care when you are producing the energy. So when you are mainly, when I'm talking about producing energy, I'm talking about the pyrolysis, because it's the only way that we know nowadays how we can treat it, or at least the one that I know. You have to avoid any emission of the contaminants in the atmosphere, and there are some filters. So even though, as I told you, even though biomass, it is in this case a waste, because you start with a biomass that is polluted, you can use it. So this is why it's something we can define as a circular economy. Also nowadays there are some studies about the ashes that you could have from different treatments polluted, that we can reuse it as biochar in this case, obviously after the treatment, because there may be different type of contaminants. So the technologies nowadays allow us to reuse all this type of waste, or maybe what we defined waste in the past. The point is that maybe this technology is expensive, but it's the only way that we can valorize the waste. Otherwise, we are surrounded by waste everywhere. So not only the biomass, but everywhere we can find type of waste. Also, the water can be a waste, so we cannot use it anymore. It's not quite possible.
Thank you so much. To add on that, I don't know if you have ever worked on fly ash. It's a byproduct of coal after burning of coal. So we have like a byproduct of fly ash. So I don't know if you ever worked on it in terms of bioremediation or phytoremediation, because it's becoming a problem, especially more in Africa. So I don't know if maybe you have any expertise regarding that, using the fly ash to bioremediation or phytoremediation to, yeah.
I know we can use it, these fly ashes. I started to work on a fly ashes many years ago. We can use it for what we can define, generally speaking, without giving a strictly definition, a bioremediation. Because, as I told you, now we can treat, we can reduce the concentration of these contaminants, so we can use it like a biochar, because fly ashes are enriched with carbon, so it's also important this point, because when we're speaking biochar, meaning that we need carbon that we can give back to the soil.
Yes, yeah, correct. Because in most cases, it's people, they don't consider using it because of the high level of toxicity in it. So rather we create like bio or phytoremediation to try to remove heavy metals so that we can reuse it again. Thank you so much. I don't have any other questions anymore.
Well,
Thank you Sydney ดรแจ้เรียนเชิญค่ะ
Right. Thank you, Alessia, for a very great presentations. I have a question still concerning about the phytoremediation. So, because phytoremediation is like using plants also sometimes together with microbes, right? And I also saw in your presentation, it's also mentioned something about avascular mycorrhiza fungi or mycorrhiza. So sometimes I feel like mycorrhiza, it's uptaking the help plants in uptaking nutrients, but for heavy metals, sometimes they just accumulate in their cell instead of translocating them to the plants or to the other part of the plants. So I wonder about the harvesting of the biomass of the plants that you use for bioremediation, phytoremediation. Do you also harvest like the roots or the rhizosphere soil out of the area?
no, okay. First of all, I know there are many studies about the microorganisms that are helpful in this case, but I cannot explain how they can be helpful because this is not my field. But for the biomass that you can get it, first of all, if you're speaking about the phytoremediation, you have to choose this, let me say, the suitable plants. For the metals, this is the point we started in the 50s to observe this type of plants, the hyperaccumulators that are these little plants, but they are not really useful for phytoremediation. They can survive, we can say. So this is why I'm telling you, then after the hyperaccumulators, you can use a second species of plant. But there are nowadays many plants that have been studied for the phytoremediation, also for metals, that can be really useful. Obviously, they have to work also with the hyperaccumulator, but the biomass, you can reuse it. So it's something, and even though you cannot, you may not only think to the phytoremediation, maybe you can use it different type of amendment. So you can use it phosphate or clay minerals to immobilize the metals. Because every time the problem is how the minerals that you are facing, for the metals I'm speaking in this case, because according to the type of minerals that you can face, that you can find in the soil, you could understand also the mobility of the metals, and you have to think if there's a reason for the mobility of the soil of the metals. Mainly it's due to the pH, so you can understand. Obviously, you have to study the area if there's a reason to change pH. I know that, for example, if you are mercury in the soil for a pH at 5, it's going to change to react, and you could have the methyl mercury that is dangerous. But in other cases, it's quite stable. For example, the other problem is if you are using phosphate for the remediation, if you have arsenic, you cannot use it phosphate because arsenic can be mobilized with the phosphate. So you have to use, for example, zeolite or clay minerals. But in any case, the point is that we must be aware, and we start to be also aware that this type of amendment are good. You could have good results, and with also working with the phytoremediation, and obviously you can decrease the cost of the remediation area. And the first point is to understand what you want to do with that area, because we are speaking about a brown field. But what is the second use of that area? This is the important point, because if you're going to use the area that you are going to treat for buildings, maybe it doesn't matter. You have to take care also only that these methods cannot reach the groundwater system. If you're going to use for the agriculture, it's important to different results. So this is the why it's not simple to decide this method is valid everywhere. It's not possible to say this. It's possible to say, I have this area that is polluted with different type of contaminants, could be metal, meaning which type of metals, the minerals that you can face, because could be different type. So this is why I was talking about toxicity and bioavailability, because it's not so simple to determine the solution. But for phytoremediation, you can apply phytoremediation and other treatment, and you could have good results. But also in this case, you have to understand which type of plants. Not all the plants are useful. You could have good results with different type of plants, but you have to think the plant that you are going to choose must survive in that climate. And this is something that is important, because many studies observe that not all the plants are good plants that we can use it for the phytoremediation. So many points you have to develop before to start the treatment.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have another question. So in agricultural soil, sometimes the contamination is from the irrigation, from using the water from the river. Sometimes the farmer just pumped the water directly from the river into the field. So, and I heard there's something about using bioremediations, some kind of bacteria that can accumulate the heavy metal in the water, and then they use something like a membrane or the mesh to trap those before pumping in the water into the field. I don't know if you have heard about this.
Bacteria in the water or bacteria in the soil?
In the water.
Okay, not for the water, but you are right, because the fresh water could be polluted. So obviously we can suggest the problem must be solved before. The other pollution that you could have with irrigation, and this is enlarging the problem, is to use a huge amount of fertilizer. So you can have nitrogen and phosphorus that reaching then the seawater. So this is the point that, first of all, speaking only about the agricultural activity and the soil, you have to think about the amount of water that you need to use it. Because in some studies, we observe that the water that we are using, without thinking in this moment if it is contaminated or not, is too much. So we are wasting the water. Then we have to think about the quality of the water and think about, again, the contaminants. And in this case, as you said, the metals that are in the water, how they are present in the water. So because you cannot find metals alone, you find minerals, and you have to understand if they are stable in that environment or not, and if they can be released in the soil, so then in the agricultural activity. I can say that if you mobilize the metals in the soil and not in the water, because they can be transported in the soil, they can, after many years, we are speaking about what it is defined the aging effect, nitrogen, phosphorus, and all the metals can reach different levels of the soil. So from the first level, so the humus part of the soil, they can reach down, they can move downward. So the point is that with the aging effect, we can say not anymore a problem. But in this case, I'm talking about something different. Contamination could be also due to a high quantity of nitrogen and phosphorus. So something that we have to reduce the amount of fertilizer, because we have already a large amount of fertilizer in the soil. So we have to work with the right amount of water for the irrigation system, obviously always thinking about the quality of the water, and then to work on the amount of fertilizer and obviously also pesticide, because we know that pesticide can be used. So it's something we have to reach a balance. It's not simple, we may know, but it's important that we start to think in a different way, because we cannot say that we don't have any contaminants in the environment. We could have contaminants for different reasons, but the form, how they are present, is important. We don't have contaminants alone. We have different type of molecules, we can say, and we have to understand how they can react also among them. Because if I'm speaking about the methods, something that I didn't say before, when you are going to remediate only metals, I'm speaking with also with phosphate, but doesn't matter the amendment, you have an internal competition. That means that metals fight amongst them to be sorbed. And the results obviously depends for the immobilization. The result for the immobilization depends on the type of metals. So we know that lead is very well immobilized. Cadmium also, because cadmium has a ionic ray quite similar to the calcium, so it's the best one. And also the way how they are immobilized is not similar. So it's also, in this case, it's important also this part. In this case, it's something, a mineralogical part of that we have to take care. So this is why remediation is not so simple as we can imagine. We have to take care about all these points, and in the agricultural activity, it's really important, because then we know that the crop can absorb all this stuff, and obviously we can eat all these metals, and we know that they are dangerous.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much. Thank you. Before we go back to the chat, I would like to bring back to the CESRA host first. They probably be having a question. พี่อึ่งคะเรียนเชิญค่ะ and then after พี่อึ่ง I will go to the chat, which is probably our last question for today. พี่อึ่งเรียนเชิญค่ะ
Yeah, ขอบคุณค่ะ Let me ask you, you said that Biocha is effectively to remove the heavy metal from the soil and water, right? And let me ask you for the practical way to use the Biocha to remove some heavy metal in the soil without taking a mistake, because of we cannot use Biocha to like a much but more than 5
But
kilograms per yeah.
no, wait, I didn't say the biochar to remove metals, but we can use it, biochar, for the soil, increasing the amount of carbon. But we can get biochar from the biomass.
Okay, because but in some paper that they say that Biochar can remove heavy metal from the soil and
There are
water
some
also.
studies about this. I'm not sure. I didn't read it, so I cannot help you. For what I know, biochar is something that we start to use a lot, because when you have all the waste from the agricultural activity, instead of burning them, you can use it to protect the soil, to increase the moisture for the soil. But then you can also burn part of this waste to produce the biochar, because this area is this product is really enriched with carbon. So we start to reuse it also. We start for different type of contaminants. I'm not sure about the metals, but there are some studies, as you said, that start to use also the biochar as an amendment, because as the characteristic of all these amendments is that they have, it's important, the specific area, that is a parameter that we have to consider for the minerals. And according to the specific area, you can increase the amount of the absorption. So metals in this, but also the other contaminant, if you are you have a product with a large specific area, you can increase the absorption of these contaminants. There are the first studies about the metals, as you said, but we didn't get to be sure. We must increase the studies about this. So this is important, because again, biochar is like a waste.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper, and you can have different of type of biochar, and obviously you also can release the carbon in the soil. That is also important. So it's important that we understand to work and to think in a different way. In this case, it's something like a philosophic way to understand how to work. It's not anymore, I'm working on the treatment for the mining activity or agricultural activity. We have to understand what we want and the consequences of what we want. This is why I'm speaking about a sustainable way, because otherwise we cannot find a solution. If we are not thinking about a sustainable way, we can say what we like it, but it's not so simple as we can imagine.
So that we have to concern about it, right? So
Start to
yeah.
see and then obviously to see the results, but also not only for the first moment, because many studies we see we have good results and it's okay. We have to understand maybe in 10 years what is going on, or maybe in 20 years, because it's important in a long way, in a long term, the results. We have to understand what's going on to the environment. So maybe in this moment, biochar it's cheaper. It has a large specific area, so we know that this parameter is fundamental for the sorption, and also then we can understand if we can use it in the soil, but also in different areas, not only for the agricultural activity, because if it is so cheaper, why not? Or maybe we can use biochar with something else, because we can not only use maybe one treatment, we can use more than one. So it depends on the area that we are going to treat.
Okay, let me ask you one question. Like a LDD, Land Development Department, we have ever have the experiments about the Typhosi to remove the heavy metal from the water. Uh-huh. That is like a natural plant that in the water that you can see, often see it. And let me ask you that there are, I mean, in tropical countries, can you recommend some plants or to use for phytoremediation for wastewater? I don't know. You have any experience for in
Not
the
in tropical
tropical?
country, but there is a plant that is an invasive plant,
Uh,
but it was quite diffused in Egypt. I don't remember the name. I can check it on an article that I read it. That being invasive, you can for example, in a constructing wetland, you can control, and it's really good, even though it's not a trees or not it's really herbaceous, but for the water it's really good. And in Egypt it is a problem because it is a beautiful plant. They start to use it a lot and now it's a problem, but you see the studies that I was reading, the results are very good, so we can use it for the water treatment. And yes, we can try also in the tropical water because Egypt has a climate, even though it's not tropical, but it's quite
yeah,
hot.
because in tropical countries we have a problem a lot in the wastewater. Yeah.
The problem is that we have to also, climate is not so, we have to consider the climate because plants, it's important. And I'm finishing, say something different. Something that we say during the nature-based solution, it's also when we want to reduce we want to entrap the carbon from the atmosphere as a carbon dioxide. So we talk about forestation and so on. The point is that there was a study for reforestation in Europe using different type of trees, and it was observed that it was not so effective. And one of the problems is that changing the color of the leaves means to change also the albedo. So the answer during the different season is different. So it seems like a funny problem, but it's important that we start to use the right plant, even though it's not so simple. So climate is really fundamental. It's not a point that we don't have to consider, even though we are observing the climate change. So we have to think about which type of plants is the right one, so also the suitable one for that area. It's not, we have the plant, I can say poplar is something good, but maybe poplar is good in Europe, not in the tropical areas. So, and also,
Yeah.
can poplar resist the climate in tropical? I don't think so because it's really
I
a
don't
tree
think
that
so. Uh-huh.
I mean, I saw poplar only in the cold areas, and during the winter must be very cold. So it's obvious that also the species it's important.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And then we go back to the chat, which is the last questions I suspect for today, from Nufradis Abdul Rashid, I guess from Malaysia. Thank you for the interesting info, Dr. Alessia. If we apply phyto remediations method to treat the heavy metals, the plants need to be discarded in certain method, or it still can be let in the area till it dies.
No, you have to discard. But this was the old waste, the old way to discard this biomass, because otherwise you can have from the leaves you can have a release from the metals. It's important that if you cannot reuse this biomass, because also it could be there's no reason to reuse, you are not obliged, but we suggest to reuse for the energy production. But otherwise you have to place in a landfill. But imagine that it's a biomass that can release the environment, the metals in the environment. So you have to be sure that also in a landfill there's not this problem. So this is why it's not so simple to find a solution, because we have to understand the consequences of the treatment. And every time we have to think what's going on, maybe in 10 years or 2 years. And also thinking about the water that you can have in a landfill, that is a large problem, the production of different problem with the leaching, with the emission of different type of gases like methane. So it's not so simple as we can imagine.
Thank you very much.
You're
So nobody asking question, right? No
the
more
last-
question.
Can I ask the last one?
Sydney.
Oh, okay, Sydney. You're the last one. Yes, okay.
Because I'm more interested in nanotechnology. So I was wondering if we can use like nanoparticles to improve phytoremediation, or I don't know if maybe you can advise using of nanotechnology such as nanoparticles or nanomaterials that can be incorporated in phytoremediation. I don't know if you have.
It is really important, because nanoparticles, we observe that, and I mean, I'm not working with the nanoparticles, but I know I published something with the nanoparticles that you are increasing the specific area. So meaning that the results of the absorption, it's better than the normal material, the normal dimension of the material. So this is why the next studies that you can observe, nanoparticles are really fundamental for the future of the environment, only because they can work better with the less expense. The point is that now technologies means a cost, but in 10 years we could have a different type of technologies, so our result could be very good. We could increase our results. So if we are thinking about the cost, that is something that we have to face with the treatment in many cases. We cannot find a solution. We are always thinking about an old way. We have to think, this is why also nature-based solution means a cost. Yes, it is cost, then it's time, but the environment is going to be a better environment, even though we didn't find the final solution. This is the point. We are just facing the problem. Like we can help the climate change, but we are not finding a solution for climate change.
Well, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney, for the great questions at the end. And on behalf of the host, many thanks to Dr. Alessia, and many thanks to all of you for participating to this event. And before I say goodbye to everyone, I would like to remind you one more time for the next CESRA Talk will take place on 19 November 2025 at 1 to 2 p.m. And next one, we're gonna have Dr. Karen from the Philippines to tell us about the prospect and opportunities of implementations of GSP recarbonizations of soils programs in the humid tropics. So we look forward to seeing you all again next month. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alessia. Thank you very much.
Bye, have a good time.
ขอบคุณค่ะ
Bye-bye.
Thank you ค่ะ
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.